Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the old masturbator, Scott Bradfield, and the old masturbator's dog, Lucky. Lucky's a masturbator too, but she takes a bath. She has to take a bath every once in a while. And Dodo doesn't take her baths anymore. I don't know what's happened to her. She's gone. Let herself go to hell. It's a bit of a chaos in here right now. We're running a bit late. We should have probably posted one of these things. Not that the world is waiting for them, but we should have posted one of these last. I try to do one a week or a little more than one a week. And I'm falling behind because we've been a little busy. Christmas is coming. We're preparing for the hugely successful Christmas Spectacular. Many of you who've been following this show since the 30s will remember that. That we started these Christmas Spectaculars, and we have a whole series of traditions, most of which we're probably going to jettison. We're going to get rid of all our traditions because we're now in a post-tech decade, but we're still going to do some Christmas Spectaculars. We've got a special one coming up without a whiteboard, without any of the high-tech glitz and glamour, but it'll still be a Spectacular. And Lucky suddenly wants to get up here. I don't know why that is. Dodo's raising hell. I don't know what this is. I was going to do, one of the reasons it took me a while is I had so many different things to do. We're just going to call this a pre-Christmas hodgepodge. We're going to get all this stuff off my table over there and things that we're finishing up and just stuff that was sitting around I kind of wanted to talk about. The first one is finishing. We started Anna Karenin, or Anna Karenina, a few weeks ago as part of our Tolstoy or Dostoevsky series, which is based on this book I read many years ago by George Steiner, which basically, he's not saying you should pick one or the other. It's just that there's certain things about each of the writers that appeals to different aspects of us as readers and writers. And we go through all these different little periods with them. I guess what I ended up doing as I was reading Anna Karenina, I was working on a piece about Chekhov. I'll talk about that down the line. And I have to say, when it came to Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, I think I said this. I think I just love Chekhov more than any of them altogether. I think he's the one that kind of I live with longer and more happily. I enjoyed Anna Karenina. It's one of the great novels. The last third of the book, the second half of the book, I went in and out of it. There are certain passages I found a little less interesting than others. I was corresponding with somebody about this who said when they were young they really liked Levin. There's two characters there's two marriages basically. There's Levin, a big wealthy kind of landowner who falls in love with this girl named Kitty, and for various reasons it takes them a while to get together. And Levin's looking for meaning in life. He's a little like the character of Woody Allen in Love and Death. You all know Love and Death. He's always looking for meaning, and he looks into religion. He looks into becoming a good to be work on his farm, work with the common laborers on his farm, and education. A lot of the stuff that Tolstoy himself did. And I remember when I was young, I really found Levin really interesting. And as I get older, he's a little less interesting. And I prefer Anna Karenina, who's not in the book as much. She's not in it as much. But her whole character and her relationship with Vronsky, which is, it's a much longer and some ways more happy relationship than you think of from someone like Madame Bovary. Madame Bovary is probably that would make my top 5 list of all-time favorite books. And I have to say, when I came through the end of this, I thought I'll probably never read Anna Karenina again in what's remaining of my life, but I'll probably read at least 2 or 3 times. I'll read Madame Bovary again. But it was so I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad I read it again. I liked it a little bit more when I was younger, and I thought it was a little long. There were certain aspects about it. The other aspect that kind of bothered me is I really enjoyed the stuff about Levin looking for meaning in life and finding much of life meaningless. You want to get down? Or are you gonna? But then when at the end he kind of finds this religious salvation, or this somehow he finds something in religion that he needed. As Tolstoy, after he writes his book, Tolstoy spends years trying to find solace or meaning in religion, and which is why he never really writes another good novel. He never wrote a good novel after Anna Karenina. So anyway, there's ups and downs. I really enjoyed the book, basically. Really enjoyed the Rosamund Bartlett. I haven't finished it. I got about halfway through this wonderful biography. One of my favorite biographies of any writers is the Rosamund Bartlett biography. And I've also been really enjoying the Ernest Simmons biography of Chekhov. 2 wonderful biographies of great writers. And we've talked about Joseph Frank, one of our one of our bathing buddies, a former teacher. And so we're going to take this. We're putting this off the shelf for a while. I'm going to take a little break from both Dostoevsky and Tolstoy next year, I think. I've enjoyed them, but I think I'm going to take a little break. I wanted to say a couple other things before we go on. We're going to say goodbye. We're not going to play the music. Greg Bear, one of the great science fiction writers of the 80s and 90s. Greg Bear died this past few weeks ago. And I wouldn't say that I've read a couple of his books that I really enjoyed a lot. I'm not a big follower of Greg Bear's work, so I'm not going to speak knowledgeably about him. But I did, when he came out in the 80s, he was sort of part of this kind of new, I don't want to say new wave, new generation of hard science writers who kind of wrote kind of old-fashioned sense of wonder stories. And he also did something that was kind of fun, which he kind of did new riffs on old science fiction ideas. So, for example, Blood Music, which is a great short novel, which was turned into a long novel in the 80s. This book comes out in 85. I think the novelette or novella comes out the year before that. I probably won a Hugo and or Nebula Award. It's clearly an homage in its way to Theodore Sturgeon's great Microscopic God, which is one of my all-time favorite stories. And he does a really nice, fun, interesting riff off that, about this kind of microcellular intelligence that creates its own communities. And in the blood, as you can see, Blood Music of this character. Anyway, that novelette or novella I strongly recommend if you like that kind of science fiction, and I enjoy that a lot. I also reviewed, when I was living in London, one of the first batch of science fiction I reviewed when I started reviewing was this one called The Forge of God. If you know the Berserker series of Fred Saberhagen, about intelligent computers that go all over the universe, basically just devouring planets, and they're basically the ultimate in interstellar capitalism. They just go around just devouring they're like Galactus. Remember Galactus in the Fantastic Four? So anyway, it goes around. And I really enjoyed reading this. It's kind of it has a kind of compelling read to it, where he follows all these different people watching these machines coming down, and just basically, I don't want to give much more than that, just slowly dismantling the planet. It's a good, fun, interesting science fiction thriller. Had a sequel to it. I don't want to say Anvil of Stars I look forward to, but I don't think I even finished it. It just didn't interest me as much. Anyway, if you're interested in Greg Bear, he was a very, very good, talented science fiction writer, and for those of you who like him, you might also like a couple other writers that showing up here. One of them is an old Eon. I didn't talk about Eon. We talked about how these are kind of riffs on famous science fiction writers. I mean, he's not. That's not a bad thing. He's just playing off riffs off some of these old ideas. Eon reminds me a lot of Rendezvous with Rama, if you read the Arthur C. Clarke novel about some alien spaceship comes into orbit around the Earth, and the scientists have only so much time to go out and visit and see what's on this spaceship. And it's really a terrific... I read it when I was 14. I loved that book. Eon sort of does a similar riff on it. I'd always wanted to read this because my old friend John Clute, who edits the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, when I first met Clute, probably, he loved this book, and he still refers to it as one of the great sense of wonder science fiction novels. So I started to read it this week, past couple of weeks, because I'd always meant to read it, and I really enjoyed the first half. And I personally got a little lost in the book. It was a little too much happening in it for me. But anyway, I'm recommending this with John Clute's much smarter than me recommendation rather than mine, where I got a little bored. They reminded me of an old friend, a writer who I've always liked, Gregory Benford, Timescape. He wrote a lot of books that I liked and a lot of short stories I liked when I was young. The first thing I ever read of Greg Benford's was Deeper Than the Darkness. I've had this book for years. I always wanted to go back and reread it. It was another one of those novelettes. It was like a 20, 30-page novelette in fantasy and science fiction. I read when I was like 14 or 15, and it knocked me out. I always loved that story. I don't remember it very well, but I did love it. And then he fairly soon after that turned into kind of, they call them fix-ups sometimes. He wrote a novel that follows on after that opening novelette, which I liked. I don't remember liking it as much as the original novel. But his most famous and one of the really great reads of kind of hard science fiction, many of you will know, is Timescape, which is, Benford is a physicist, and he sort of wrote about the potentials of time travel and alternate realities. And a lot of ideas, frankly, which have kind of become fairly accepted, such as the notion there's multiple universes, multiple time zones, infinite array of potential time streams. Anyway, Timescape is a very interesting picture. In the 1980, I think this book comes out, of all the ways our planet can be destroyed by itself. There's the plankton there. There's some sort of creature that's taking over the oceans, and the whole ecosphere is falling apart. And basically all this stuff we're watching now, Benford's talking about back then, and all these alternate time streams trying to get in contact with each other. Really good novel. I remember vividly how much I enjoyed that book. I also remember enjoying, I don't remember it as well, In the Ocean of the Night, which is about another, it's kind of a little rendezvous with Rama. It's about, as I recall, an alien spaceship coming in. Again, these are from the 70s and 80s, these books, which is basically when I last read science fiction. And here's one I've never, or kept up with it really very well. This is a book I've never read. It's on my shelf, and I want to read it. It's Greg Benford's If the Stars Are Gods. I think I'm going to put that on my stack of kind of escapist holiday reading stuff I've always wanted to read. It was written by Greg Benford, another one, a novella I think originally that won some awards, and with Gordon Eklund, who actually wrote some really, really good stories that I recall as a kid. One was called Dear Aunt Annie, which is I recall as a science fiction spin on Miss Lonely Hearts, the great Nathaniel West book. That's how I always think of it in my head. I remember really loving that story. Anyway, those are some good ones. And I also came across, this is by a friend of mine, and this is like nicey nepotistic sort of thing. I haven't read this one. Paul McAuley, if you like hard science fiction, I'm going to put this on my kind of fun holiday reading list. 400 Billion Stars is a great title. I picked it up. I used to have the hardcover, and I'm always looking to replace them. So I got this so I could replace my old hardcover edition of it, the British hardcover. And I've never read it. It's Paul's first novel. He wrote really, really good short stories. I've always been a big fan of his short stories. I've read several of his novels I've enjoyed. The Secret of Life, and the Fairyland. I used to use that in class a couple times. I often use his short stories in my classes. And he's had, I was looking for it. I have a couple of them somewhere in the closet. I can't find anything anymore. And I had it out and I can't find it. So there you go. He has a very inexpensive online short story collection called Little Machines. I used to use it in my class quite a bit because there's 2 or 3 really perfect teaching stories in there. They're just kind of just perfectly written little stories, and excellent short story writer. Anyway, the novels I've liked, and I thought I would try to read this over the holidays too. I'll enjoy it. I'm sure it looks quite good. And I also want it because it's the kind of the end of the old Ballantine. This is Del Rey when they turned to Del Rey, but it still has a nice package to it that I quite like. So that's it. We're putting together a holiday reading. We're going to have a big holiday bathtacular. I'm doing a big special edition of Pointless Adventures from Literature and Christmas books that we've done over the years. I'm reading Snoopy, and I've just finished this volume. This is 1991, 1992. I think over Christmas I may actually finish the whole wonderful Fantagraphics complete Peanuts. Amazing, beautiful series of books. Very reasonably priced too. Okay, happy bathing. We're very excited. We're getting everything ready for the bathtacular. There'll be no high tech, no pixels, but we're going to have a really good Christmas show. Just so we're going to try to live up to the high watermark of the bathtub, which would probably be 1936. When Jack Benny was here, and we had a lot of special guests like him and Fred Allen. We're going to just have me and Lucky and Dodo are going to be here, and Lucy might pop by, and it's going to be very exciting bathtacular. So try to make it. Bye. Don't expect any Christmas music because I keep getting sued if no Christmas music. Bye.